This is my first one. I've done a few Zoom presentations with schools,
Yes.
where it's more like a Q&A.
Mhm.
But yeah, I haven't done anything like this yet.
Yeah, this is a whole fan club meeting for you.
I have to say, librarians are the best audience for Zoom I've ever encountered. And I've been to a lot of teacher meetings, and I'm both, so I can say that with, with experience in both. But librarians get it, so you authors are lucky to have us.
Good. Librarians are always a good audience.
Well, we're so blessed to have great authors to promote their stories to our students. So the chance to connect with each of you today is just priceless. So we're thankful to the Browns for putting this together for us. And we're just going to have a great time.
And Lindsay from Candlewick.
Oh yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I mean, I think what you guys are doing is wonderful, and I'm so happy that you guys invited me to help invite some of our authors and illustrators here.
You came through with some wonderful ones, Lizzie. We're so excited.
Yes, thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules. So we all appreciate it.
Lindsay, did you have any feedback from the last time when we were together, how the authors felt about meeting with us?
So this is the first one that I've been hosting with Candlewick,
Okay.
but I sat in on a previous session and I was just blown away by just the feedback that the librarians were giving, but also how great the authors were at presenting. And so it was kind of a no-brainer after that I wanted to make sure that something like this was available for our authors too. So thank you guys for being so great. Like, it was your wonderful feedback and how excited you all were that really made me want to do this.
Thank you.
Lindsay was here at one of our Redbud meetings, and she read some potential Redbud nominees.
That's probably where
Thanks,
you
Chris.
remember her from, Janet. Yep.
Okay, so we're pretty much we're gonna start in 1 minute here as soon as everybody's ready. I guess we'll go ahead and start. Okay, again, we want to thank Lindsay, with Candlewick for setting this up tonight. And we have a great lineup of authors and illustrators who are going to talk to us about their newest releases for Candlewick. Candlewick is one of our favorite publishers, and we're very excited to be working with them and partnering with them. Our first guest tonight is Jancy Dunn. She lives in Brooklyn, New York. She has a new series that's easy books, picture books about Teddy. And her newest release is I'm Afraid Your Teddy is in the Principal's Office. Previously, I'm Afraid Your Teddy is in Trouble Today came out a couple of years ago, and it was really awesome. But besides being a children's book author, I can't wait to talk to her about her adult books that are really cool about relationships. And she also used to be with MTV and Rolling Stone, several big newspapers and magazines and things. And we're very excited to hear all about her and get to know Jancy Dunn. Welcome, Jancy.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I do a lot of different things. I guess a lot of people in publishing do, don't they, these days? So yeah, I write for the New York Times parenting section quite a bit, which is fun. So yes, and yesterday I was interviewing somebody and my elderly cat jumped up on the bed behind me and yacked up a hairball. So that made things fun. So yes, I wrote this book, I'm Afraid Your Teddy's in the Principal's Office. And I dedicated it to, it's funny, my parents recently downsized their house. And they did the time-honored ritual of handing you a box of stuff that they don't want to store at their house anymore. And I was looking through it, and it was a bunch of old report cards. And one report card said, it was from Mrs. Manley, my fourth grade teacher, and she said, I would be very surprised if Jancy doesn't grow up to be a writer one day. And Mrs. Manley called it. And I got so moved. I thought, I wonder if Mrs. Manley is still around. And so because I'm a reporter, I was able to track her down. It wasn't difficult. And she's still very much alive and well in Ohio. She's 89. And so I dedicated this book to her because it's just amazing. I went back in that time period and I remembered how I felt when I read that report card. And I think it planted a seed in me. I thought, oh, maybe I could be a writer. And I was just so grateful to her. So now Mrs. Manley and I are pen pals and we write each other. I frequently get, about every 2 weeks, I get a letter from Mrs. Manley. I don't know if you can see her beautiful teacher's writing. And, you know, there's a dog on it sometimes, or a bird, and various stickers. And we've become friends. And it's just been wonderful. So I told Scott Nash, the illustrator of this latest Teddy book, I'm going to dedicate it to Mrs. Manley. And so he dedicated the book also to 2 teachers that made a difference in his life too. So, and for this one, my sister is a teacher and my best friend is a teacher. So for authenticity, I would frequently consult them. I'm the older sister of my sister Heather. And so when I text her, I expect a response instantly, even if she's teaching. And so I would say, like, Heather, go into your principal's office and tell me what inspirational posters she has on the wall. And she would say, okay, I'm on a break, but all right. And she would run, and then she would come back and say, okay, dream big. So that's what we put in the book. And there's all kinds of little details, like for the first Teddy book, I got the idea because my daughter would go to kindergarten and she would come back and say, Mommy, I feel like when I left for school, my Teddy was on the bed, but now the Teddy's on the floor. What do you think happened? And I thought, oh, hello, that's a book idea. So that was my idea, to sort of have Teddy call his friends other stuffed animals and get into a little gentle mischief. So for the first book, he had a wild party over at his child's house when the child was away. And this time it was at school. And one thing I love about Scott is he likes a lot of action in his pictures. And I said, okay, how about we do 25 stuffed animals? Because when I do readings for kids, you want to make sure their animals are all covered, right? And even now, kids will say to me, oh, I have a stuffed lobster, or a stuffed, man of war. And I don't have that represented in the book, but I try. So, I don't know if there was actually a stuffed man of war, but you get what I'm saying. So yes, there's 25 stuffed animals, and I hope you can kind of see, I'm still kind of lousy at Zoom calls, but there's just so much wonderful action and movement. This is where the animals, they all hitched a ride in the kids' backpacks, and then they burst joyously out of the backpacks. And I just love the joy in these pictures. There's so much action. And so we had the animals kind of run through the school while the kids were in class. So they do things like of course, you have to go to the art department, right, and have some fun. They went to the cafeteria and they made a life-size mold of a Teddy out of Sloppy Joe filling. Everyone remember that from school days? And then one of my favorites is, I hope you can see, there's the principal. And then the kids made, oh God, can you see? The kids, the stuffed animals they tried to escape when they were being chased by some teachers, made something out of a little escape hatch out of pipe cleaners and then shimmied down there. And here's another one. Again, with just so much wonderful movement. Here's Scott, there's Coach Sherman. They end up getting all these balls and kind of going nuts in the gym. And Coach Sherman is based on the coach that I had in school. And my favorite is, I can remember when I was a kid, seeing the door to the teacher's lounge and thinking, ooh, what's behind the door? Like you picture it as being this amazing VIP lounge, right? Not realizing, I mean, my sister and my best friend took me to the actual teacher's lounge, and There's some bag lunches. My sister has a funny mug that says, "I got into teaching to become rich and famous." So there's a little humor going on, but it's basically not that different from, it was vastly different from my imagination. But in the book, I decided to make it very different. And you can see there's a trampoline, there's an ice cream parlor, there's a DJ, there's a disco ball in another shot. So we just had so much fun with that, because you know how it is when you're a kid and you think about what's behind the door in the whole adult world. So the fun thing about this book is that when you ask the kids what they would like, first of all, I believe when I was a child, I really did believe that my stuffed animals were alive and that they had a rich inner life and that they did all kinds of things when I was away. And so it's not a leap for a kid to believe that. And when I ask kids if they have any ideas, I mean, they've come up with so many. But again, even though there's mayhem in the books, it's all very gentle. And more than one child has said to me, they said, "Oh, I've got an idea for a Teddy's book. They could make good choices." I'm like, "Aw, I don't know if that would sell. I mean, it might, right?" But so that's been my adventure with the Teddy books. And I'm still thinking of more. And I have the original Ratty Teddy around here someplace. He's very well loved, as a proper Teddy should be. He's kind of disgusting. He's been left many different places. And so he's going to give me lots more ideas, along with all the kids that I visit, whom I miss so much. It's been that was the real joy, because I've done books for adults, which feel free to ask me about. It is vastly different to do a reading for kids. I mean, they're just so excited. And they ask so many funny questions. Have you ever been bitten by a shark? That you normally don't get with adults. And it's just been a joy. And if I could just write for kids all the time, I would. So yes, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Do you have an actual Teddy who inspires you? Or
Hold on, I can't hear you.
I missed that, I'm sorry. Do you have an actual teddy bear that inspires you with all these stories? Do you have one from your childhood or some such thing?
Hang on, it's on the floor. Be right back. BRB.
Janet, I have a feeling I know what you're gonna say.
Well, now it just went out of my mind.
He's kind of gross, right? Which is how it should be. He's only been washed a couple of times because my child likes to keep that patina, you might call it. So this is the actual Teddy, and he's been lost a number of times. And he just, there's been a couple of series of kind of ratty stuffed animals photography series where they're really well loved and they're missing limbs and so forth. And that's what I think of when I think of this Teddy. So yes, this is the real one. And I have children bring their stuffed animals again to readings. And sometimes, I mean, the backstory of these animals can get really elaborate. And I have to kind of keep things moving because everyone has a long story that they want to tell about their animal. So it's been really fun.
Yes. So do you have the next Teddy story in mind?
I've been mulling over, now that I have lots of time at home, right? I've been mulling over some ideas, and I've been thinking of everything from holidays. I poll all the kids, and the front runner seems to be some sort of sports game or an amusement park. So that may be next, or something to do with holidays. I mean, you could really sort of go on and on, right? But an amusement park, I think, is kind of where I'm going. And I've been sort of thinking of a couple of ideas.
Well, the research that you would do for a book like that would be pretty amazing.
It's funny, as I'm talking to you, I'm sort of holding the Teddy, and it makes me feel comforted, But yes, I mean, especially because you could have some of the other animals that are in the books kind of take a starring role occasionally. And again, with this one, it was a conscious decision on my part to not even show a child so that the kid could put themselves fully in the book and not even picture a kid. Not that there's anything wrong with picturing a kid, you know, but just so that they could kind of make it their own. And, you know, I just love how every time I read the book, another little visual joke comes up. Like, I don't know if you can see, but Scott, oh, I'm so bad at this. Okay. You know what? I really needed to do a PowerPoint, but I don't know how. My 11-year-old has to teach me. And then next time I do this, I can come back with a PowerPoint. But
Oh, good, you have to come back.
So this is the animals looking in the teacher's lounge, and you can see, can you see the stuffed monkey looking upside down into the camera? I mean, he just packs it with these visual jokes, and we just work so well together. And Scott has done 60, he's illustrated over 60 children's books, so he really knows what he's doing. And for a newbie like me, it was just amazing to be able to get him, and we're just very in sync. And I spent a week with him at his art institute last summer. He lives in Peaks Island, Maine, outside of Portland. And so I really got to know him over the week, he and his wife, Nancy, and it was just lovely. So we even have a deeper working relationship now. And it's been really fun.
Well, I know we're also thankful you've been rescued from the task of writing for grown-ups, that you found your real self for writing for kids. Thank you for honoring our students and us by sharing your talents by writing books for us. Thank you, Jancy.
My pleasure.
You know, I like that you call him Teddy instead of giving him a name, but because I immediately, of course, my class is called the Bears. So I immediately thought of the reason I picked bears, and the name of the bear in our house was Oatmeal. And your Teddy looks surprisingly like oatmeal, like you eat. It's because he had that sticky fur. But is there a reason you didn't give him a name?
It was for the same reason that I didn't put a kid in the book. And look, again, I'm new at this and I really don't know what I'm doing. So I just did it kind of because I thought it would be fun, but I just wanted to call him a generic Teddy. So yeah, and this one, again, in real life, he is named Teddy. But I wanted to keep it just as generic as possible. So kids could, although I do like oatmeal. It's a thought for a future book. Oatmeal.
My husband is the one responsible for the naming.
All right, we're having a great time with Candlewick. We're talking with Jancy Dunn, author of I'm Afraid Your Teddy's in the Principal's Office. We're also joined by a couple of Permabound reps, Cynthia Marin from New York, in fact, Brooklyn, which is where Jancy lives, and then also Ken Cuckle from Connecticut, Mass, and Rhode Island. So anyway, Jancy, I have a question about I'm Afraid Your Teddy's in Trouble Today. Your website says something like, the book I'm Afraid Your Teddy Has Been Naughty Today is coming in October. So it looks like it went through maybe towards the end of the editing phase. The title got changed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. We're all adults here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
No kids. Yes. One of our marketing reps, Googled Teddy and naughty. And it did not even occur to me that, you know, like lingerie, teddies. I mean, do people still, maybe because I'm a middle-aged mom and that's not kind of in my repertoire, too much information I know, but when you Google Teddy and naughty, inappropriate things come up. And thank God for that person that had done that in the marketing department, because that's you don't want children Googling that. But I just, people still wear teddies. I guess they do. I guess. So yes, we did a couple of different rounds of what can be something that doesn't involve lingerie, and we came up with "I'm Afraid Your Teddy Is in Trouble Today." And the title does intrigue kids immediately, you know, and they think, "Oh, what did he do?" But yeah, no naughty, ever.
Well, because I know that we've spoken about your two Candlewick books. Our guests might not know that you have written several adult books. For instance,
Mhm.
How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids, and
That's a great title. Yeah.
Why is my mother getting a tattoo? So uh, the transition from being an adult writer, you know, to relationship type author, how's the transition going to children's books from there?
Well, you know, as Nora Ephron said, everything is copy, right? So I've written about everything from, I co-wrote Cyndi Lauper's autobiography. Yes, I wrote a series of essays about various things, including my mother getting a tattoo at the age of 68. And she's a very, she's a member of a former Southern beauty queen, member of the gardening club in her town. And then she decides to get a tattoo of a big black raven on her wrist. And I worked at Rolling Stone for many years. I don't have a tattoo. And she just, she made the announcement at dinner, and it was one of those things where we're all eating and we're like, with our forks like that, because it came out of nowhere. But good for my mom. She went through with it. She still wears pink cable knit sweaters, but when she's paying at Target or something, she loves to flash her wrist so that, you know, people will say, "Oh, wow, what's that?" And in fact, yeah, it's about a 3-inch black raven. And so then, yes, I also wrote a book called, it is a bit of a harsh title, but again, our marketing department said it does command your attention. How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. And it's been published in 12 languages, Russia the first to buy, interestingly, and all the Asian countries. And yeah, my husband is a writer as well, and he very kindly agreed to expose our marriage in this book, and I still do a lot of talks for that as well. And it's really about how to love your husband after kids, but that's not quite the grabber that How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids is. So, you know, so yes, I talk to I write for the Oprah magazine along with New York Times parenting section. So I know lots of experts, and it was that thing where I had a baby and our marriage was not doing well, even though I knew so many experts, and you would think it might, you know, I would know what I was doing, but I didn't. And so, so we fixed things. Still together. He's in the other room, and we've been married 19 years. So
That's great. One other quick question. You were a VJ at MTV, and this is more going to lead into a story about Kyle and I, probably, because
you're really digging it all up, aren't you? Yeah.
our parents outlawed MTV for us, but whenever they would leave the house, MTV was the first thing turned onto the TV. So
Of course.
we have seen you on MTV, and the people that you met during that time, are they in your autobiography? Is it kind of a tell-all?
Yes, you know, because I have this rock background, again, you know, I mean, at least writing for magazines and stuff, you just have to do a bunch of different things. And so, yeah, I wrote a memoir as well about my life when I was kind of in the rock world, and I wrote for Rolling Stone. And so, yes, a lot of people that I interviewed, like, you know, Madonna and Beyonce and all these people that I mean, I think about it now, and it really is like another life. But yes, it's all in this book called, another one that I wrote called But Enough About Me, because when you interview celebrities, I've learned never to mention anything about yourself. You just go right into them, because otherwise their eyes sort of glaze over. And so, yeah, I have a lot of rules when I interview celebrities, because they kind of are a different species in a lot of ways, and there's a way to kind of handle them, I guess. So that includes a lot of my tips on what to do, because yeah, it's strange. good, fun, very adventurous. But yeah, I mean, I got chased once by paparazzi because I was with Ben Affleck and they thought I was his new gal pal after Jennifer Lopez. And I ended up in the tabloids, like, because they thought it was me. And I'm sure he was like, I can do, you know, I'm sure it insulted him. But yeah, so I've had a lot of odd things happen to me, which maybe can come up somehow in my kids' books, because a lot of them have been surreal. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope
maybe
you enjoy name dropping about these rock people that I've interviewed. They certainly didn't. A lot of times I would spend 3 days with someone and they wouldn't know my name. You know, they don't. It's not like we're friends now. It's not like I have Madonna on speed dial. But it was fun and interesting. I went through her bathroom cabinet and called my friend Susan and listed what was in there. I'm sorry, I'm getting off the subject. This is what happens when you get old enough. People ask you about your past and you start going on and on about it.
Well, I think the point of all
Madonna.
that, I think that Teddy needs to take on sort of your role and needs to have paparazzi in maybe the next Teddy book or something like that. I think you figured out your next line with your next Candlewick book. So we have unfortunately run out of time with you today, Jancy, but we've had so much fun. If you want to look up Jancy and her books and other things, jancydunn.net. And she does do school visits through Candlewick. I think we schedule them that way. Is that correct?
Love to. Yes.
Great. And so there's a lot of great librarians here who are amazing hosts for authors. So maybe we can work something out. So we're very thankful for your time today. Thank you, Jancy, and congratulations on your success. And we can't wait to read I'm Afraid Your Teddy's in the Principal's Office. It comes out next Tuesday. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, make sure that we have it on your order this fall, everybody, okay? All right, well, moving right along. Great night with Candlewick and Permabound. We also have Permabound reps from New York and Rhode Island and Connecticut, Massachusetts. And our next special guest is Matt Tavares. You know him as the illustrator for several of Doreen Rappaport's Big Words books. You also know him as the author of several great books, including Dasher, How a Brave Little Doe Changed Christmas Forever. His most recent Candlewick book is Ben of All Trades, The Most Inventive Boyhood of Benjamin Franklin. And from Ogunquit, Maine, we are very excited to have Matt Tavares with us. Hello, Matt.
Hi. Hi, everybody. All right. So I am going to share a little behind the scenes look at some stuff from my three most recent books, which are all with Candlewick. There's the brand new one, A Ben of All Trades. This one I illustrated. It was written by Michael J. Rosen, which is a story from Benjamin Franklin's childhood. And then I have Red and Lulu and Dasher, which I wrote and illustrated. And those are both sort of holiday picture books. So I'm going to take an awkward moment and share my screen so I can show you some stuff. So I think it's this one. I'll share, and then you'll see my kids for a second at Disney World. And then I think once I press play, are we seeing the right thing now?
Yes.
I can't hear you guys. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to zip through and just give a little behind the scenes look at some of this stuff. And I thought I'd focus on the illustration side of it, starting with Red and Lulu. This book came out a few years ago. It's the story of a pair of cardinals who live in this big, beautiful evergreen tree, and they are very happy until one day their tree gets chopped down and taken away, and it causes Red and Lulu to become separated. So sort of an adventure where Red has to go try to find Lulu. So it's a Christmas story, sort of a love story. I'll show you a little bit of what went on when I was working on that book. All my illustrations in Red and Lulu and Dasher are done in watercolor, and there's some gouache here and there and pencil. So it's all done the old-fashioned way. But all the preliminary stuff for years I've been doing on my computer. So this is a picture I took as I was working on the sketches for Red and Lulu. Now, I used to do my sketches just pencil on paper, which is still a fine way to do sketches. I do that sometimes. I've started doing all this stuff on the computer, mostly because I love that when I draw on the computer, I can move things around. And at this part of the process, I'm trying to figure out the best way to tell the story and best way to illustrate each page. And for a picture like this, if I'm halfway through and I think maybe red should be bigger, or maybe red should be smaller, or maybe red should be on the other side. If it's a piece of paper, I'd have to make a bunch of different sketches to figure that out. I'll show you what I can do when I'm drawing on the computer. Here, I can just highlight. I can highlight red. If you look at the bird there, I can just make him bigger. I can make him smaller. I can move him all around. I can press save at different moments, which comes in handy as I'm trying to figure out all this stuff. So I'm still just drawing like it's a piece of paper, but then the different elements I can separate, and it really comes in handy as I'm planning everything out. So here's how that sketch turned out. Now at this point, I send my sketches to my art director. I have my editor who helps me mostly with the words in the book, and then as the illustrator, I'm working with the art director, and we kind of all work together as a team. So then I wait to hear back from her. Sometimes at this point, I'll have some feedback, which means going back and doing a new sketch. Sometimes it means making a few changes here and there. Another reason working digitally is very nice. It's just easier to work back into it. For this one, she didn't have any suggestions. This sketch was good to go. But the one thing we did change was the words. And this happened a lot in this book where, like for this page, when I first wrote it, when it was just words on a page, it seemed just right. It says, red kept flying along the highway. He flew over a big bridge. So yeah, before it had pictures, that seemed just fine. But once I saw it with the pictures, my editor and my art director and I decided we really didn't need those words. Because in a picture book, part of the story is told with words and part of the story is told with pictures. And if something is very clear in the picture, I really don't need to even mention it in the words. So I always point this out when I show this at schools, like where it says red kept flying along the highway. Can you tell that from the picture? And you totally can. He flew over a big bridge. Can you tell that from the picture? So we kind of realized I did not need any of those words, so we just crossed them out. So for this 2-page spread in the book, that's how it ended up looking. It's a really fun way to tell a story as an illustrator. For some pages, you have words and pictures working together to tell the story. I guess I'm just a little square on the side here, but some pages, it's just the pictures. I like that one there. There's multiple panels. So as kids are reading the book, they read the words, but they also read the pictures. To really get the full story of a picture book, you have to read the words and pictures, and they work together to tell the story. A couple pages later in Red and Lulu, here's another one where I'd written these words. At this point, Red has arrived in New York City. And this was just a lot of fun. I just kind of used my imagination and tried to think of all the places Red might end up in New York City. And I tried to think of interesting places that a bird could go. Having a bird as the main character is just a blast because they can go all these places that we can't go. So I had the idea of having Red fly around the Empire State Building. And this was another one where at first the words seemed fine, but once I started thinking about the picture, I thought I'd really like for it to be nighttime and I wanted it to be snowy. And I thought with this dark nighttime background and all the falling snow and the city lights, it'd be really hard to read those words. That's something I have to consider too, just the design of it. And again, looking through the words, I felt like, you know what, I don't even need any of them. So I think a couple of these sentences we moved to a different page, but the rest we just got rid of. So this was another page where it became a wordless spread. So a lot of my writing, and I think a lot of picture book authors probably do this too, where you write and you write, and then you spend a lot of time just taking away. And hopefully in the end, the words that are left are the words that need to be there. At one point, this book was wordless and it didn't quite work, but there's a lot of getting rid of stuff that I've written. Now, when this book is fiction, but a lot of stuff in the book is real. So, I have some nonfiction books where there's a lot of research. For this book, it was kind of fun. I got to make up a lot of the stuff, but For much of it, I did do some research. Like to draw cardinals, I wanted to make sure my cardinals looked real. I'll show you some of the stuff I did for that. I set up a couple bird feeders outside of my studio, and every time a cardinal came by, I would try to get some pictures of them. I got a good close up of a squirrel there too. I also wanted to get a good look at how their wings move. So sometimes if I'd see a cardinal at my window, I'd grab my phone, set it to slow motion video. So you can see Lulu there. And then when they start flying, I'd get a nice look at what their wings are doing. And then I had all these little videos on my computer, and I could press pause at different moments just to get a good look at that stuff. And also I found plenty of pictures online too of cardinals flying. Took a couple trips to New York City. That's where a lot of the story takes place. So at this part of the process, I'm kind of just imagining, there's this bird flying around the city, trying to think of all the different places Red might end up, different places that would be fun to draw, fun for kids reading the book. I tried to think of different challenges he might run into, like he wouldn't know where to find food. He's from the suburbs. He doesn't know how to find food in the city. So I saw a bunch of peanut shells on the sidewalk by a street vendor. So I thought, there's a scene in the book where Red's trying to get the peanut shells and some pigeons are sort of shooing him away. So that's some stuff from Red and Lulu. Jump into Dasher here. And this is similar where it's a fictional story, but I want it to look real. So one thing I did was in this story, I was thinking after Christmas a few years ago, I was thinking about how Santa's reindeer are probably, some of the most famous animals in the world. But I had never heard any story telling how they became Santa's reindeer. How were they chosen for this job? So I decided to try to tell the origin story of Santa's reindeer. I'll take you through a little bit of that. For this one, I went to the zoo. There's a zoo in Massachusetts, about an hour from my house, that I found out has reindeer. And this is really helpful just to see them up close. I took a few trips to the zoo and I just kind of watched them take pictures, take videos, just to see, what does their fur look like up close? How do their legs move when they walk? And that, as I was drawing all these reindeer, that helped quite a bit. Got some good pictures. I spoke with the woman who worked at the zoo and took notes and learned as much as I could from her. Even these fictional stories, I try to do my homework and get everything right. Got a nice close up there. One of the other main characters in the book is Santa Claus. Had a visitor to my studio one day. Now for this part of the process, it's sort of like I'm the director and he's the actor, where I'll show him my sketch and I'll say, all right, you're riding your sleigh. And I kind of get it set up so the lighting looked nice, and I take a bunch of pictures. And then as I'm drawing, I'll use these mostly just for some of those details that are hard to draw. Hands are really hard to draw. Some of those textures like the fur, how does the light shine on the folds in the fabric? It really helps to have a model for that stuff. And of course, I got a selfie with Santa. Just some other stuff, for drawing new fallen snow. I'm always going out after snowstorms. I live in Maine, so we get plenty of snow in the winter. I found this beautiful red sleigh at a horse farm years ago. I've used it in a couple different books. So I have this whole reference, photo file that comes in handy as I'm working on these books. Just a picture I took as I was working on the Dasher art during a snowstorm. You can kind of see what it looks like as I'm working. This is my table that's right behind me, right here in my studio. And here I have one finished illustration, and I'm kind of looking at that to make sure the colors are matching up and the details are sort of consistent. So for a picture like this, a lot of it comes from my imagination, but I didn't just sit down and draw. To draw the reindeer, I went to the zoo a few times. To draw Santa, I did all these photo sessions. I found the sleigh that was just right. Hey, a cardinal is outside my window right now. That's awesome. I have a collection of model horses. My wife collected them when she was a kid, so I use those when I draw horses. And then that all combines with, I wanted this to be nighttime and snowy and this kind of magical light coming down. So that all kind of comes together in the picture. Seriously, there's this male cardinal right outside my window, like looking at me. It's weird. They're such cool birds. So a little bit about A Ben of All Trades. This is a story about Benjamin Franklin's childhood, written by Michael J. Rosen. It was really cool to illustrate. When you think of Benjamin Franklin, you picture an old man. You know, anytime I ask kids if they know Benjamin Franklin, everyone knows who he is, but you picture him as about 75 years old. It's kind of amazing to think of him as a kid growing up in Boston. You think of Philadelphia too, but he actually grew up in Boston before he left as a teenager. And this whole story is when he's about 10 or 11 years old, and he's supposed to choose a trade. And his father was a candle maker. So Ben was supposed to be a candle maker, but he could not stand being a candle maker. If you think of someone with his curious mind, sitting there making candles was just not going to work. So the whole story is kind of his dad trying to find a trade that this kid would like, and him sort of using a little bit from all the different trades to start sort of his life as an inventor. I'll take you through a little bit about how I did this book. Now, all these years I'd done my sketches digitally on the computer, but then the final art is done the old-fashioned way. So this is my first book where the final art actually was digital. I'm going to show you how I did this. So this is my sketch for the jacket, which I did on the computer. From there, I drew everything with pencil. So this I did the old-fashioned way, but there's so many different elements to a lot of these pictures. I thought it would be helpful to draw them separately. So I did the dock in one picture on one piece of paper. I did the background. I did Ben there. I actually redid Ben. I didn't like how he looked in that one. The ship. And then in my computer, I can combine everything. So it's just this new tool that I can use that I've kind of slowly gotten used to over the last decade to now where I'm comfortable enough doing it. So this is, at this point, I've scanned all the different pieces of paper. I'm assembling them on my computer in Photoshop, and you can see how I can take Benjamin there and just put him right where he belongs. And this was a case where after I finished the picture, I realized I didn't like how he was standing. He looked a little too stiff. So I just redrew that character and then dropped in the new character, where in the old days with all my first 20 books, I would have had to do the picture all over again, which does happen sometimes. So there's how that one turned out. And then I can show you the cover of the book there. So yeah, so that's just a little peek at some of the stuff that I've been doing over my past few books. If you guys have some questions, I can answer some questions.
Do you prefer being the author illustrator or drawing for someone else's story?
Oh wait, I can stop sharing my screen now. Let me figure out how to do that. Escape. There we go. There, that's better. You know, I guess if I had to choose one or the other, I really do love the projects when I get to do both. Those are, I feel like they're easier in a way, and it's all mine. So if I'm working on illustrations and I think of a different direction I want the story to go, I can really embrace the whole thing. Where if it's someone else's book, I'm a little more gentle about the story, and I want to make sure I'm being, respectful to what they're doing. But then at the same time, by collaborating with other people, I've ended up making books I never would have thought to make on my own. So that's the thing I really do love about that. Like I did a book called The Gingerbread Pirates with Candlewick, where all my characters were cookies, pirate cookies. And I never would have thought to do that kind of book on my own. And even like Lady Liberty, I did with Doreen Rappaport. That was my first nonfiction book. And before that, I didn't really think of doing much nonfiction. But once I did that book, I really loved it and decided to kind of explore my own subjects to write about. So it's nice to do both.
Do you have another baseball story that you have that you're just waiting to work on?
You know what? I don't. It's weird. I have 7 baseball books, and for a while it was like that's just all I was thinking of. And then somehow after growing up Pedro, I just haven't wanted to do any more baseball books. I don't know if I will. Maybe at some point I'll get back to it, but somehow getting into Red and Lulu, I just loved making that book so much. And it's my first fiction book that I did in a long time. And it kind of made me want to go more in that direction. And now I'm actually doing a graphic novel, which is a whole other thing, which is about a basketball team. So it is getting back into sports a little bit, but I don't have any baseball books in the works right now.
Did you grow up in Maine?
I grew up in the Boston area, in
Okay.
Winchester, Massachusetts. And where I am now, it's southern Maine, so I'm only about a little over an hour north of Boston. And I always
And-
came up to Maine in the summer, so I kind of grew up here.
Also, where did you study art? It's
I
just-
went to Bates College, which is in Maine, in Lewiston, Maine, and I was an art major. So it's a liberal arts school. And my first book, Zachary's Ball, was actually my senior project in college when I first made it. And then I was lucky to find Candlewick, and they published it.
And it had a title change, didn't it?
Yes, it was Sebastian's Ball originally. I think that was my editor's idea to switch the name.
Look at Kenneth and all of his research he's been doing on all these books. and
Yes.
name changes.
Fascinated with the Magic Foul Ball. I can't believe I haven't read that book.
Yeah, it's still in print. It's amazing. I mean, I'm so glad I thought to do that when I was 19 years old, and grateful that I get to still be doing this.
Yes, and there's a connection with Derek Lowe. Do you want to tell that story real quick? We've got a couple minutes left.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is probably 2001. The book had been out for a year, and the Red Sox, for a long time, they would do these Red Sox reading program every summer where kids could read a certain number of books and win tickets to a game. And so they would make a poster of a Red Sox player reading a book. And so in 2001, it was Derek Lowe, who that year was the closer for the Red Sox. It might have been 2002, but it was around there. He was the Red Sox closer that year. And it was him reading Zachary's Ball, which for me was like the coolest thing. So I did a signing at a game, and they handed out posters for the first 10,000 fans, which was so cool. So people all around Fenway Park had this poster of my book. And so Derek Lowe came into the game in the 9th inning, and he blew the game. Like he gave up a 3-run homer to lose the game. And they gave the posters out. This was probably the mistake. They were rolled up. So they flew really well. They were like javelins, and they had to stop the game for like 7 or 8 minutes. So they could pick up all these posters that everyone had thrown onto the field. There were probably 1,000 posters. Just the whole warning track was posters, but it was pretty fun. I got some good pictures of it.
Way to be new. I mean, that just be
What are you
no.
gonna do? Easy come, easy go.
Yes. There needs to be a book about that. Anybody else have a question before we unfortunately have to move along?
Just thankful for your art and how it graces our shelves as we share your stories with the kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm grateful for all of you for sharing the books with your students and your patrons.
And if you do want to write about baseball, we've got a couple of Okies,
Oh yeah.
Inch and Mickey Mantle that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And while you're here
I
doing
did one Yankee
research-
book already. I don't know if I can do another. I did Babe Ruth, but
And while you're here doing research, I'm sure there is plenty of people that would love to have you at their school while you're here.
yeah,
So,
I can't wait to get back to doing school visits. That's something that was, I mean, there was a lot of things we missed out on this spring, but just to look at my whole calendar of school visits and none of them happened, it was a bummer.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I did want to ask you about your Monday mornings. Can people go back and watch your Monday mornings with Matt that you did this summer?
Yeah, I've done that for 11 weeks. This is the first week I haven't done it since mid-March, but yeah, they're all on my website on tavaresbooks.com. I did them all as Facebook Live videos, so they're all on Facebook too and YouTube. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Just having just a little drawing lesson every Monday morning, and I've had a nice little group of kids that joins me and draw. It turned into mostly animals. They would always I'd ask for requests, and they were almost all animals. So we drew a bunch of different animals, but it was a lot of fun.
Since you did the Cardinals, I have a bird suggestion, our scissor-tail flycatcher that
Oh yeah, never heard of it.
It's
I'll have to
I
look that
hadn't
up.
before I moved to Oklahoma, but in this time we've been walking, they're just amazing. And there are
Interesting.
painted ones too, which I discovered
cool.
in my neighborhood.
I'll have to look that up.
Well, Matt Tavares, we're just so thankful that you were here today. Y'all can look him
Thank
up
you.
more on matttavares.com or tavaresbooks.com. Really appreciate your talents and your time, and congratulations on all your success.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It's a great evening with Candlewick Press. We're joined by Lindsay from Candlewick. Wave to everybody, Lindsay. And also a couple of great permabound reps from the Northeast, Cynthia Marin and Ken Kuckel. Thank you all for being here today. Our next special guest is visiting with us from Austin, Texas, and her name is Cristina Sundtornvat, and she has 3 Candlewick releases in 2020, and we cannot wait to hear about all of them. The most recent is A Wish in the Dark, released in March. One coming up in October, All 13, the incredible cave rescue of the Thai boys soccer team. And I might have my information wrong, but
No, that's right. And then The Blunders is a picture book that came out.
There it is. Yeah, there it is right there. It got cut off on my printing. Okay, so thank you. We want to welcome Cristina Sundtornvad.
Yay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I literally just had to go tell one of my children to put pants on in case they came out while I was talking. So just forgive any of that if that happens. We're doing virtual, this is our first week of virtual summer camp, and oh my gosh, we are a mess. So I've got one kid doing Legos and one kid doing dance in the other room, and hopefully everything will be fine. Okay, so I'm so excited to talk to y'all. Yes, I'm calling in from Austin, Texas, and I grew up in Weatherford, Texas, so North Texas, and not far from Oklahoma. So it's so nice to be with all of you. I am going to talk to you about Wish in the Dark and All 13 today. I don't have much to talk about for The Blunders, but The Blunders is a great picture book. It's very funny. It's a funny counting book about 10 kids who are convinced they've lost one of themselves because they just keep forgetting to count themselves. And it's illustrated by Colin Jack. So is it okay if I share my screen, Kenneth? Is that cool? Okay, I'm gonna do that here. And I'll try to go through these as quick as I can, and then we'll have time for questions. So I'm so excited that I have 2 books that are coming out this year with Candlewick that are both about Thailand. So my father is Thai. He immigrated to the United States when he was a teenager, and so I was born here, and go back to Thailand a lot, still have family over there. And I never dreamed that I would get to have even 1 book out that was set in Thailand. So to have 2 is such a thrill. I'm going to tell you a little bit about A Wish in the Dark. So both of these are middle grade books. A Wish in the Dark is a novel, and it is the story of a boy named Bong, who is born in a place that's pretty much like a prison. So Bong he was born there because his mother was sent to prison for a minor crime, and she passed away. So he is an orphan. He has another best friend who lives in the prison with him, who is also an orphan. And the rule in Bong's world is that if you're born in the prison, if you're a child in the prison, you have to stay there until you're 13 years old. So like many of the rules in this world, they are unbearable and unfair and not just. So Bong manages to escape from the prison. The city that he lives in is situated right on a river. So when he escapes, he floats down the river. He makes it into this smaller village outside of the big city, and there he finds a Buddhist temple. And in the temple, there is a kind monk who takes Bong in and hides him, because if Bong gets caught, he'll have to go back to prison. He'll be punished even worse than before. So Bong disguises himself as a monk. He shaves his head, and he starts to believe that maybe he could hide in this prison forever and no one will ever find him. Just a few years later, who should show up in the village where the temple is, but the prison warden's family. So the prison warden has a daughter. Her name is Nok, and she recognizes Bong. She is the first person to recognize him. And Nok has grown up, thinking that she has a very rigid sense of right and wrong. And she's a girl who follows the rules, who always follows the rules. She has a lot to prove to her family. She thinks that she has to prove herself to them in order for them to love her. So in her mind, as soon as she recognizes Bong, there is only one right thing to do, which is to turn him into the police and make sure that he suffers the consequences for the bad things that he did. So she chases him, and he runs away. He runs back to the big city where the prison was located. And in this city, he is kind of able to disappear because it's such a big city. And he discovers that the people of the city are also suffering under these rigid and unjust laws. And the city is on the brink of a revolution. So Bong has an opportunity to help the people of the city. And he has to decide, is he going to do that? Or is he going to run away and save himself because Nok is still chasing him? So the book goes back and forth between Bong's point of view and Nok's point of view. And you know, another big question in the book is whether Nok is going to change her mind and stop chasing Bong and change her outlook. So if that sounds in any way familiar, I'll tell you where the inspiration for the story came from. It came from a very different book. So this is a middle grade twist on Les Miserables, which was one of my very favorite novels when I was a teenager. And it's a book that had made a big impression on me. So like Les Miserables, A Wish in the Dark, you know, one of the themes in the story is the difference between the law and justice, and the ways that we as a society justify treating people cruelly by using the law as an excuse. So the book talks a lot about how we label each other, the dangers of putting labels on each other and judging each other before we know each other or see each other for who we really are. Ultimately, you know, the book is, I wanted to write a story about compassion and the power of compassion and how that is actually a superpower. So A Wish in the Dark is a fantasy. There's actually magic in the story, and there are people who have magical powers. But I really believe that compassion is a magical power that we all have, that kids have. And if we use it, we can change the world. So that is A Wish in the Dark. I'll go back to share my screen again. Because I have more slides to show you for All 13. So All 13 is the story of the Thai cave rescue. So I don't have time to go over the entire story of the Thai cave rescue, but I'm hoping that many of you remember the story because it was like the biggest global news story when it happened 2 years ago. So I was actually in Thailand that summer. 2 years ago, at the end of this month. I was visiting family in northern Thailand, probably just an hour from where the boys disappeared. So I was there when, you know, it was just kind of this local news story that, oh, did you hear about this whole soccer team just went missing? And oh, it started from being just a local news story to a regional news story to pretty soon it's on every television wherever we are in the country. And then when I got back home to America, it's everywhere. It's absolutely the biggest news story all over the world. As you know, it had a very happy ending. So after all of the boys, the 12 boys and their coach, so 13 of them were rescued. Candlewick, so excited that I got the book deal with Candlewick. And this is the first book that I had ever sold that I had not written before. So I knew that one of the things I really wanted to do with the book was to highlight Thai voices. It was something that I really saw missing from a lot of the news coverage in the United States, where just how many Thai people were involved in the rescue. So I knew I had to go back to Thailand and interview people and do my research there. So these are pictures from my trip, and I went back in October of that year. So that's me and my translator and regional guide, AKA my father. And so we went around together and he helped me to interview. We interviewed a lot of the rescuers. The monk who was in the temple in that picture, he was like the head monk at the temple where the coach did a lot of study and was kind of like a mentor to the head coach. I was able to meet with rescuers who were there from like the very beginning when the boys first went missing. And so they were there for the rescue lasted for 18 days. The boys were, they couldn't find the boys for the first 10 days and it took another 8 days for them to get out. So they were there for a really long time and was able to talk to all of them. Was able to interview the divers, some of the divers who were involved in the rescue. The picture on the top of the man crawling through the cave was Vern Unsworth, and he knows that cave like better than anyone knows anything. And I was able to talk to him, and he was a wonderful resource and just connected me with a lot of people. The Thai Navy SEALs were part of the research project also, and they provided a lot of photos. I interviewed Major Charles Hodges from the US Air Force, and I wish I had time to tell you all about him. He is one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And interviewed people that you really did not hear about on the news. You heard so much about the British divers, but the man in the middle of the photo here, his name is Tanet, and he was involved in controlling the water, which was like a huge part of the rescue because they couldn't get back there to dive because there was just so much water flooding the cave. And he was the engineer who was in charge of part of that. And these are some pictures that Tanet shared with me. And I think you can tell that these rescuers are up on top of the mountain and they're putting all of these things in place, and they've actually used bamboo as a pipe because they didn't have enough supplies. They were just in such a remote part of the mountain. And so these are shots from inside of the book. So these are actual, this is kind of showing you what the book looks like. There's so many pictures because so many people were so generous in sharing their pictures with us. I got to meet the boys, and that was a wonderful part of the research process, was actually getting to meet the team and getting to know them as people, because I really wanted the book to portray these kids and all of their bravery and all of their courage and their silliness and their laziness, their kidness. They are just regular teenagers, and I really wanted that to come through. And the book goes back and forth between what is happening above ground and what's happening with the kids below ground. And there's just so much great stuff in the book. I mean, a Candlewick book is beautifully made. That's why it's coming out 2 years after the event and not 2 months after the event, because we really wanted it to be a gorgeous piece of artwork also. And there's so many diagrams and maps in the book and illustrations, which were wonderful to have. Okay, Kenneth, I'm really conscious of the time. I hope I'm not going over. I could talk about that for so long, but maybe if you have questions, I can answer some questions.
We still have about 5 minutes with you, so you're in good shape. Thank
Okay, good.
We didn't see any pictures of you in the cave. That wasn't part of your research, right?
Oh, wait. Okay, so wait. Do you mean you have 5 more minutes for me to talk, or 5 minutes for our questions?
No, just 5 minutes for the rest of your time. I was just going to ask.
Oh, of me in the cave? No, I could not go into the cave because the cave was flooded until like February. So the boys went missing in June, and they had to dive in to get them out. And it was not until, no, it's actually March that the cave was dry enough to go into. So I don't know if you remember, but there were all of the, a big part of the book is talking about what should they do to get them out. And some people wanted to leave them in there. And they were thinking, oh, when the water goes down, they'll be able to just walk out. Well, the water didn't go down till March. So if they would have left them in there, it would have been months, 9 months before they could have gotten out, which is just crazy to think about. So yeah, I have not been in the cave. Vern Unsworth told me when I go back, if it's the dry season, he will take me in the cave. I don't know. I don't know if I'll do it.
Well, it's just amazing to see that people coming together, using all their ingenuity and everything. And, you know, human life is so precious. And to see that many people coming together, that's very exciting. It's such a great book, such a great story.
It was so amazing. And it's just, it's so great to have it coming out and be able to talk about a story. You know, I think that's one of the reasons that people were so enthralled with the story, was because we just don't get enough of those positive moments of humanity coming together and cooperating. And it truly was this really international, multidisciplinary effort. It was just like the best of what humans can do when they work together.
Anyone have any questions for Cristina?
How do
Did
your
you say it
children
was
feel?
middle grade? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. How do your children feel about the books that you've written, Cristina? Do you share them with your children?
Oh yes, I do. And they love it. They're my biggest critics and my biggest fans. No, but they just think, like, they think they know the boys. Like they know the boys' names, and they think they're friends with them. Like they think all the books are about them and involved with them. And yeah, they love it. It's great to share it with them. And Carol, were you asking if it was middle grade? Yes, all 13 is middle grade. I feel like, you know, there's so much information. It was really hard to decide what to put in the book. So I really tried to just make it engaging for anyone. So I really wanted it to be like, if you were in 4th or 5th grade, you could read this book. But if you were like an adult and you had followed the story, you would also find lots of fascinating things that you did not get to hear about in the news.
On that point, what was your most fascinating thing that you learned as you did your research?
Oh my gosh, I've it's just so many things. I mean, I feel like all of the effort that was done to control the water is something that just really I was amazed to learn all of that. I would say that the thing that struck me the most when I was in Thailand and talking to people, and this is like one of the things about interviewing people who were actually there as opposed to just like reading about it in the news. Every single person that I talked to told me that they were completely sure that the kids were dead. Like no one believed that they were going to be alive. They had been there for 10 days and it was just like, they didn't have any food. They didn't have any water. They were in the dark. No one thought they could be alive except for their parents. Their parents believed that they were alive. They were praying with these monks and they told me they never stopped believing their kids were alive. And I just thought about the juxtaposition of like the parents who were right there next to the rescuers and the rescuers having to walk past these parents every day and they were sure they were going to find out that their kids were dead. And then 10 days later, they discovered that they were alive. It was just like a moment, you know, even as much as when they were actually rescued, that nobody could believe it. No one could believe that. It was just like so incredible, I think. Oh, Kenneth, you're muted.
There we go. Unfortunately, we have reached the end, but I just want to throw a couple of things out there. First of all, everybody, you can look up Cristina, her books, and more about her at suntornvat.com. Does that sound right? Good. And then also, she does do school visits, and she's in Austin, so that'd be a closer trip. Might save everybody a little bit of travel expenses. And I was going to ask you some more questions, but we ran out of time. But it's just been such an honor to have you tonight. Make sure that you check out her other stuff from other publishers. She's got out called Simon at the Art Museum. She has a couple of, she's got a middle grade series called Changelings. And she also has a chapter book, an early chapter book series that has 5 volumes in it. What's the name of it, Cristina?
Diary of an Ice Princess. So it's like early, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade.
Yes. So, and Jennifer Newkirk, we saw a reaction there. She must really enjoy that one.
My daughter has those books up in her room, and I got
All right. We don't want this to end, but we have to let you go. Thank you so much for being here, Cristina.
Thank you all so much.
Welcome, or thank you so much for being here tonight. All right, it's a great evening with Candlewick. They're amazing authors and illustrators. We're having a great time with Oklahoma, our Oklahoma friends, and then also some friends from the Northeast. And we're going to introduce our next guest, Maggie Tokuda Hall. She is the author of The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, which just came out last month through Candlewick. And also an Octopus, which is a picture book that came out in 2016, but the paperback version is coming out in September. Award-winning author, we want to welcome Maggie Tokuda Hall.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to y'all about my books. I know that these two covers don't look like they have a lot in common. And in a lot of ways they don't, but I promise there's actually a common theme. So also an octopus is a story about how to tell stories by telling a story about an octopus who wants to fly in a purple spaceship. So they try all kinds of things like building one out of waffles and glitter and umbrellas and good things like that. For some reason it doesn't work. I don't know why. I'm not a rocket scientist. But it's basically about how to kind of identify rising action, a moment of climax, which for the octopus is lying down on the ground and crying, as I know I am wont to do now and again. And at the end, we identify the moment of resolution when the octopus sits down on the ground and starts to play the ukulele and people come and listen. And some of those people are rocket scientists, and that's identified as the moment of resolution. And the ending is up to the readers. And it's an invitation for kids of all ages really to tell their own stories by giving them really basic building blocks of narrative, a character who wants something, a sense of action escalating, a moment of climax and resolution. And so I hope that it's easy and fun to use in classrooms in a way that maybe won't feel super didactic. It's just a fun story, but surprise, it's also got a way to tell stories yourself within it. I like to tell kids, and this is 100% true, that I wrote this book because I'm extremely lazy and I love stories, and I just want them to write stories that I can read. And that is incredibly earnest and very serious. And on my website, there's a contact page. And if any of the kids you ever teach write a story of any age, they are welcome to send it to me. It would make my day, and I will always respond. So that came out in 2016. And when this book came out, I had just quit my job at Apple and decided to travel through South America with my husband. We lived in a 4Runner for like a year and a half and drove from the northernmost point in Colombia down all the way to Tierra del Fuego and then back up a little bit again. And it was amazing. And in that time, I started writing this book, which is The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. It is also a story about stories. It's less of a how-to, but it is a story about stories. It's about the stories that we tell about ourselves, the stories that we tell about other people to define them, and also the types of stories that nations tell to define themselves. So there are two main characters in this story. There are Flora or Florian and Evelyn. Flora is a gender fluid pirate who has been forced to sort of present as a boy in order to earn the respect of their colleagues, I guess, for lack of a better term, on a pirate ship. And then there's Evelyn, who's sort of a rich girl who's being shipped off to an arranged marriage that she wants zero part of, in no small part because she's queer, but in a large part because she didn't have any say in the matter. Her parents put her on this ship that is secretly a pirate ship. Magic and hijinks ensue. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it has all the things that the title promises. A mermaid that's been caught by pirates that Flora and Evelyn decide to set free. A witch with a lot of ulterior motives whose magic functions by power of narrative. And the sea, who is a point of view character in the story, who has interludes, and she kind of comes in and affects the story in interesting ways, I hope. And so for Flora Florian, there is the story that they have been kind of had pushed on them about themselves, which is you might have been born a girl, but that's not the story you get to tell anymore. You have to pretend to be this boy in order to survive on this ship. And because Florian has been telling that story to themselves for so long, their gender identity becomes fluid. It becomes situational. It's a thing that sort of changes dependent on who we're around, who she's around. And that was largely inspired by my own experience as a teen and my own changing sense of gender as I aged. I remember when I was in high school, most of my friends were boys, and the way they acted around me versus the way they acted around other boys was completely different. There was a sort of confrontation that would happen every time they would have to code switch between big group of guys where they're all pushing and farting and shoving and like telling horrible jokes that are mean, and the point of them is to be mean and the point of them is to be violent, to hanging out with me where that was no longer acceptable. And I wanted to bring some of that in. And for Evelyn, the story that she has been told about herself is that her own life actually doesn't have any value except for to serve sort of the men in her world. And so both of them throughout the entire story are just trying to shake the shackles of the stories that have been told about them in order to better find their own truth, their own story, the story about themselves that they actually believe. And it's all set in this world where there is sort of an imperial class, the Empire of Nippon, who are sort of coded Japanese, British, American, and they have been telling this story about their own nation for forever, which is that when they go out and colonize the world, they bring order, they bring peace, they bring, great economic benefits. And that's the story that Evelyn believes about her people. But as she goes out into the world, she sees sort of the atrocities that colonialism begets. And she starts to see the way that those stories are also not true. And I hope that feels particularly pertinent right now. And at all times, but particularly as we as a nation are sort of grappling with the stories that we told about ourselves versus the reality that so many people have lived in our country. I hope that this book can open up conversations about how to compare and contrast those things and how to better bring those two stories together. I wrote it, shortly after the 2016 election. And so I think there's no way to kind of avoid how big of an influence that was on how I thought about the way that narrative shapes the world around us. Because we had a presidential candidate whose personal mythology, if you think of it as a Venn diagram, there's the personal mythology that's on one side and the reality, and the crossover between the two was so narrow, and it didn't matter. What mattered was that the story he was telling was so powerful in some way, regardless of its relationship to the truth. And that was fascinating and upsetting and interesting to me. And so I brought a lot of that into this story. And as I mentioned, I was also driving through South America at the time, and it is impossible to visit that entire continent and not to think about colonialism constantly. Every city you go to, there's a huge Spanish cathedral right in the middle of it. The omnipresence of Catholicism is, the vestigial organ of colonialism, and the way that indigenous people are treated within their own countries is also a vestigial organ of colonialism that is there all the time. And so I was in kind of constant confrontation with the violence that colonialism begets and how long of a tale that creates. And one of the books that I used the most to research it that I thought might be interesting to you folks, since you're book people, is Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, which is largely about how European dominance came to be, but also the kind of luck that created the situations where that was possible, as opposed to some sort of superiority in civilization. And I found that incredibly helpful for me as I was world building, because each nation state that I created is sort of a combination of countries. And so I tried really hard to make sure that what I was represented the violence of colonialism, but also the arrogance and inaccuracy of a lot of the ideas that it's predicated on. Which I promise has everything to do with Also an Octopus, just a perfect cross-merchandising situation. I'm sure your kindergartners will love this incredibly dark and violent story. Actually, I'm in all seriousness, please don't give this to your kindergartners. It is for ages 13 or 14 and up. I think 13 and up because when I was in 7th grade, I absolutely could have handled this, but you know the kids in your life better than I ever will. And so you'll be able to make that judgment call yourself. I will say that there are allusions to sexual assault that take place off the page. One of the characters is battling post-traumatic stress as a result of it. There is a moment where one character gets their finger cut off. It starts off with a moment of violence as a way of just letting the reader know that this is a story with violence in it. And so if you read the first little prologue and you think, oh God, then the rest of the story may not be your bag. And that's okay. That's why I put it up front so that you would know and you would be safe and you don't have to play this game if you don't want to. In which case, I have a different book for you. So those are sort of generally my thoughts about The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, and also the octopus. Sure, stories about stories. But I'd love to answer any questions y'all have.
Do you prefer writing novels or writing picture books?
Oh boy, I would say they are both very hard and I enjoy both of them. I will say I think picture books are harder. Every word has to be perfect in a picture book, whereas in a novel, you have like a little bit of room to play around. There's a little bit, it's a more forgiving medium. I will say I have 2 more picture books coming out in the next few years and 2 young adult graphic novels coming out, but this is the only novel that I've written. So I do feel like maybe my track record is telling me that I enjoy illustration better. I do like that when you write an illustrated book, there's a moment where you get to hand it off and then a whole other artist gets to come in and make it this other luminous, wonderful thing. And when you write a novel, everything about it is your responsibility. And on the one hand, it's kind of cool to be king of the castle. And on the other hand, it's terrifying. So that's like a lot of pressure. And I really enjoyed Benji's illustrations for Also an Octopus. I have a book coming out with Candlewick next year called Love in the Library that'll be illustrated by Yasi Mamura about my grandparents who met in a Japanese internment camp. And that still ends up managing to be a story about stories. Anyway, and I'm just so excited to see what she does with it. I think that illustrators are the lifeblood of our industry and add so much wonder to a book. I know I was a reluctant reader as a kid, and it took me a really long time to shift away from illustrated work. And so I still have a really strong affinity for it. I was a big comic book reader. If it wasn't Calvin and Hobbes or like Nancy, I probably wasn't reading it till like 4th or 5th grade.
Now, with
I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
With Also an Octopus being so great for helping kids to imagine their own stories and with writing, you have an offer, I think, on maybe your website that is that still stand where if someone is using it to teach, that you will read the kids' stories if they send them to you?
Absolutely, I will. Just like I kicked off today, I'm a very lazy person, but I love stories. And the whole point of writing that book was so that kids would send me stories. And I've gotten a few, and they are a delight. And it is my solemn vow not to plagiarize any of them either, which was a very concerned 2nd grader asked me about that. And I thought that was a very valid point, very valid concern. And I will not steal your story, tempting though it may be.
Anybody else have questions or comments about Maggie's books?
So what made you wander into graphic novels, Maggie?
Yeah, I'm a huge graphic novel reader. And so that was sort of how that happened. I love being able to rely on image to tell part of the story. When you write an image in a novel, there's still a huge risk of it being incredibly heavy-handed if you don't use exactly the right words every single time. And I think one of the things that illustrated work offers you the kind of craft opportunity of is to write with a much lighter hand. And I really appreciate that. I'm not a person who overwrites. Like you hear about people where they're like, I wrote 200,000 words and then I used 40,000 of them to write this middle grade novel. And that sends like a cold shiver down my spine because I tend to write the skeleton of a story and then fill it in. And so graphic novels are kind of like you're writing that skeleton, but you're trying to just create the most articulate set of bones that you can so that you can hand it off to an illustrator to put the muscle and the skin on it. And I think that's an incredibly rewarding process. And it's one that I love witnessing just as a fan in the world. I love reading a graphic novel and stopping and being able to read the whole story at once in an hour and then go back through and see the way that the illustrations either contradict or deepen the meaning of the words that are said, the way that, you know, eye contact might change between characters, or the way that their text bubbles change shape over the course of the story. There are so many ways to complicate the narrative with these really slight touch things that of course can be done in words, but as a person who also studied art, I think I gravitate toward graphic novels and illustrated work because it's the language that I feel the most fluent in.
I just want to say that I think it's amazing that you're able to switch between voices. As we've talked to different authors over the years, you know, it seems like a lot of authors find their lane and that's kind of where they stay. And it sounds like you've got a picture book voice, you have a young adult voice, you have a graphic novel voice, you know, all that. And I just think that's a testament to your talent, you know, to have all that range. That's amazing.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. I find that when I have writer's block, it's usually that I'm trying to force myself into the wrong project at the wrong time. And so writing across lots of different ways are the ways that I've stayed working. I will say that it's my agent's nightmare and she hates it. She's been very supportive and very sweet, but it means that I don't have a brand, whatever that means. And so when you see my name on a book, it doesn't mean it has anything to do with another book that I wrote. But I hope that just means that I can have fun conversations that are totally different with totally different people at any given moment. But thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Any other questions from anyone else or comments? I have a question, but I'm going to wait to make sure no one else wants to ask one. Okay, unless you're about to say something. Were you about to say something, Maggie?
Nope, go for it.
Okay, so Kyle and I started something called the Redbud Read Aloud Award a few years ago. And Kyle and I are constantly having debates about whether or not picture books should rhyme or not. And we also are kind of trying to write a book. Kyle's working on it more than me, but we've also had debates with that too. And I happened to stumble across your blog where you had a great entry about whether or not they should rhyme.
I have strong opinions on the matter, sir.
You mind responding on that? We have just like 2 minutes left with you.
Yeah.
Do you have?
Okay, so as a little bit of background, I was a children's bookseller for like 1,000 years. I read for a children's book agent. I worked in children's book marketing. I worked in ebooks, etc. My whole career has been in children's books. And so a lot of people send their aspiring children's book authors to me, which is fair. And a lot of the times they have rhyming books. And I tell them, don't do that because mostly rhyming is incredibly difficult. So the rule is if you are perfect at it, go for it. But that's the rule. And perfection is incredibly difficult. Picture books are already so hard. So the metaphor I like to use is it's like trying to do gymnastics when you set the uneven bars on fire. And it's like, okay, it's already hard enough to do gymnastics. It's really difficult to get published. It's hard to find an agent. You know, all these things are already really, really hard. The group narrows and narrows and narrows who gets published. When you write a picture book that rhymes, you write a manuscript for that, and even one rhyme is kind of off, the agent who's reading it or the editor who's reading it, a lot of the time will be like, nah. And it's an easy way to say no. And so that blog post I wrote is really long and just about the many different pitfalls there are when you're writing rhyming picture books. And with all of it, I don't mean to say you're not good enough, because I bet you are. But I just want to challenge everyone who tries it to take it as seriously as it is, because rhyming is so hard and just so tricky. And there are so many ways for it to feel lazy or not right or to stall out your story that, especially for beginners, I really don't recommend it. That being said, many of my most favorite picture books are rhyming. I think Anna Dewdney is the perfect person to look to if you want to see what perfect rhymes look like. And it's like, if you can't come Anna Dewdney strong, then maybe just keep it in your drafts folder for now, because it's not likely to be the one that's going to get published right off the bat.
Makes sense.
Thank you for that.
We have had such fun with you, Maggie. Thank you for coming today, Maggie.
Thank y'all for having me.
Make sure that you have, if you're in the, if you have a high school library, make sure you have the Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. If you have a elementary library, make sure you have also an octopus. You can visit her website at prettyokmaggie.com, and she does do school visits. You can contact her about those there. Thank you, Maggie.
And you can read my long ranty blog about rhyming there. All right.
Yes,
Take care, y'all.
Bye. Thank you so much. All right, it's a great night with Candlewick. We're getting about ready to introduce our last special guest, and we're here with Kyle, my brother, and Lindsay from Candlewick, and let's see, we have Ken Kuckle from Permabound from up in the Northeast in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and also Cynthia Marin, who covers Long Island, New York, and New York City, the Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. All right, we are about to introduce literary royalty, Newbery royalty. We are so excited to have Mr. Paul Fleischman here today. He recently brought out Alpha Maniacs, Builders of the 26 Wonders of the Word. It came out in April through Candlewick. You know him as having, he had Westlandia that was on our Oklahoma Sequoia Award nominated list. And you also know him as the author of Joyful Noise, Bull Run, all those award-winning books. Welcome, best-selling, award-winning author Paul Fleischman.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to talk about Alpha Maniacs today, and I'm going to take you back to my youth and probably yours as well, in which English was taught how? Diagramming sentences, spelling tests after spelling test after spelling test, weird scenarios in grammar books that had lines like borrow me a pencil that you were supposed to realize was not the way we talk. And English just wasn't that interesting until at age 10, somebody gave me Ounce, Dice, Trice. One of the great books ever written, one of the great picture books ever put together, one of the great unions of text and art. The art was by Ben Shawn. It's out of print, in print, it comes and goes. You can find it. What's inside of it? Lists of names for whales, attempts to spell the sound of a yawn, words that sound like counting from 1 to 10. Ounce, dice, trice, quartz, quince, sago, serpent, oxygen, nitrogen, denim. And suddenly the world was never the same for me. I saw that language wasn't just something for the classroom, but it was a playground all its own. It was a place for play, for curiosity, for games, for adventure, for exploration. I set out to be a teacher, actually. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my first book was bought while I was still in college. And so I put education school behind and never looked back. But many of my books have been written for the teacher I didn't become or might have become. And Alpha Maniacs is certainly one of those. It's aimed at middle school and up, way up. It was originally a play off Broadway for adults. But really, it's better as a book because the material is bizarre and is much better if you can reread it and look it over again and again, especially with the gorgeous artwork and design by Melissa Sweet, whose works I'm sure you all know well. I wanted to give students and any readers the same experience I had with Ounce, Dice, Trice, that mind-expanding experience. And, you know, if we want students to love language, that's the kind of thing we need to show them. We, of course, need to give them great books to read, fiction and non. We need to show them the joys of reading to younger siblings, the joys of taking part in readers' theater. That was crucial in my education. But we need to show them also poems for two voices, how to write codes, maybe how to do calligraphy and design your own letters. Maybe the fact that you older students could write a novel during NaNoWriMo. And we need to show them that a bunch of people have gone way beyond grammar. And those are the people in Alpha Maniacs. Let me show you a few. Okay. People like Georges Perec. He's the author, of course, of the book you all know well, La Disparition, a novel without the letter E in it. That's called a lipogram. It's been around since the time of the ancient Greeks, leaving out a letter. It was translated into English, had to be a title that wouldn't have E in it, so it was called Avoid, cleverly. He's in the book. Who else is in? Well, we've got Daniel Nussbaum, who wrote Plate Speak, in which he retells the classics using California vanity license plates. Strange, but true, and incredibly witty. We have Doris Cross. What did she do? She was an artist, but she looked at her dictionary one day and she looked at the headwords at the top of the page, not like this one, which has the same headword. And she felt that they were sort of related. It was a strange chance conjunction of two words. And suddenly she began removing words from the dictionary. She painted over them. She drew over them. She added color. She whited out. And she turned a work of prose, a reference book, into poetry by leaving strange conjunctions of words. She started a whole movement. In fact, she started two movements. In a way, she's the parent of the altered book movement. People have done wild things with books like this. People have also taken her subtraction method and applied it all kinds of places. This is hard to see, but it's a page from the most famous work of subtraction called A Humament, in which the British artist Tom Phillips took a forgotten Victorian novel called A Human Document, and he took out words and took out letters and turned it into a humament.
Mr. Fleischman,
Pardon me?
I hate to interrupt you. I think that you may be sharing, we're seeing the gallery of your images. We're not seeing the individual ones. Do you have?
are. Well, that's not good. How can we do that? Let's see. Can you see that?
Maybe stop sharing and then share again. Maybe you accidentally selected the wrong thing to share.
Okay, let's check it out.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
That happened to me earlier today. I was sharing the wrong screen accidentally in the Zoom meeting.
Okay. Let's see. Are you seeing the mess of my, that's it?
Now we're good.
I'm sorry, apologies. So here's another work of subtraction. If you look closely, it says the poems of Emily Dickinson, and then in dark type, we have the MS of my kin. Janet Holmes took Emily Dickinson's Civil War era poems and subtracted them into poems about the wars in the Middle East of today. Let's see. This is Mary Ellen Solt. She's an artist who played with letters in jaw-dropping, amazing fashion. This is from a book of hers of flowers. This is the word zinnia. Yes, there is all kinds of things you can do with language. But let me take you a little in depth into one of the people in the book. Actually, I'll start with my own self. That's my handwriting when I was college age. 4 lines of pencil between the 2 lines on the page. Teachers were not wild about having me in class. But I already knew that words could be used just to visual effect as well as their meanings. And so it appealed to me to have blocks of text like that. I'm not the only one. This is cuneiform, early Sumerian writing. We've all seen pictures of that. And believe it or not, people have found miniature cuneiform on little tiny pieces of clay instead of the big tablets it was usually on. You know, 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. Way back from the beginning, people were playing, people were hacking, people were experimenting. When Gutenberg did the Bible in the 1450s, it was a big hunk of work. Maybe you've seen one. I finally did a few years ago. It's impressive. It's 17 inches high, each page, 12 inches across, and the whole book weighs over 50 pounds. But the chapter that this is in is one about David Bryce, the king of miniature books. To get to him, you have to realize that no sooner had Gutenberg published the Bible than people began thinking, what could the printing press do for me for making miniature books? This is a book of prayers from Anne Boleyn. In fact, I believe this was in her pocket when she went to the chopping block. As you can see, it is very tiny. It is also just a book of prayers. Couldn't get the whole Bible in a miniature version. It was just too long for the moment. Let's fast forward a couple hundred years after Gutenberg, and we get to Benedict Schmitt. He was a printer in Holland, and he advertised his wares by showing off this incredibly small book. It was a book of poems about flowers, 1874, and it held a record for a good long time. During that time, paper got thinner, printers, fonts got smaller, and eventually the Divine Comedy was printed in Italy, the complete thing. Miniature book people consider a miniature book anything smaller than 3 inches by 3 inches, and this came in under. But still no Bible. That had to wait for this man, David Bryce. What was his contribution, his breakthrough? He realized that printing could now be done from photolithography plates. You could take a photo of something, you could reduce it, and then you could print that. Nobody said that was breaking the rules. And sure enough, he got first the New Testament down and then the whole Bible down into one edition, smaller than 3 by 3. It came with a pocket in the cover that held a magnifying glass. Everest had been climbed, it had been done. But the people in my book don't want to stop with Everest or anything else. And so they kept going. Next century, let's fast forward a bit. You can see where we are. We're not measuring in inches anymore. We're measuring in millimeters. This is a Chekhov short story called A Chameleon, 9 millimeters square, done by a Russian printer in 1996. That's a euro 1 cent coin. Onward. This is from a printer in Tokyo, another book of flowers. It is 0.75 millimeters square. That would be hard to turn. But it pales next to the next and last slide I'll show you. This is the Bible, etched with a beam of ions on a silicon chip by some nanotechnologists in Israel, 0.5 by 0.5 millimeters, roughly the size of a poppy seed. Those are the kind of people in my book. Those are my people. So you see what it's like. In a way, writing the book was like giving myself a constraint, like Georges Perec writing a novel without the letter E. The play had 26 characters, one surname per alphabet letter. So it went A, B, C, D, E, and on through. That was really, really hard to do. It took me a good 10 years to accumulate all the people I needed and get them in the right order and find people for the letters I didn't have anything for. It was a lot of fun also. It was a challenge, which leads me to mention something else about the book. It might seem crazy with such people who epitomize art for art's sake, but I think this book is a very strong defense of the arts. If you have an administrator who doesn't believe in the arts, yes, you take this down there and put it on his desk. Why? How could that be? Well, two reasons. The first is the practical one. If you look at these people, what traits do they exhibit? They notice things. They're curious. They're persistent. They have incredible imagination. They use divergent thinking. And they love a challenge. Well, what's going to get us out of all the zillions of problems surrounding us? It's going to be people with those traits, people with imagination, people who think of a new way to solve things. who know there's more than one way to skin a cat, just like there's more than one way to write the word zinnia. Yeah. So, and interestingly, unlike what that administrator might think, the arts aren't easy. The arts are hard, 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 hard. Why? Because they confront you with open-ended questions that have no right answer. And artists of all types spend their days, as I do, beating their heads against those questions. You can't answer them definitively. All you can do is brainstorm, come up with as many possible answers as you can, and then pick out the best one, which often involves combining ones, maybe more than two. That's often been the case for me. Yeah, arts are tough and vital. The less practical defense of the arts, a few years before I wrote this book, I volunteered on the stage crew of an outdoor production of Annie, the musical, and I was amazed. So many people volunteering their times in costumes, working with the dogs, working with the kids, choreography, music, lighting, sets, virtually nobody getting paid. And in America, where we're used to everything being rated by, how many dollars it costs or how many dollars somebody earns in a year and all like that, this was a dollar-free zone. Tons of hours just for the joy of putting a story forth in front of the community. And it was an incredible experience that reminded me, this is what the arts do. It's not about putting, people put incredible amounts of time, like my subjects, into activities that will not better the roof over their heads or put a penny in their bank accounts. They do it because they love using that imagination. They love creating. They love solving problems. They love a challenge. They love difficult constraints. And, a life without all these things, a life without the joy that these bring, without the beauty that we're pursuing, without curiosity, without challenge, we have a word for that. The word for that is empty. A life with those things is full. And the people in Alphamaniacs certainly epitomize full lives. Wow. Well, that's my spiel. What do you want to ask?
We're very thankful for that story. Anybody want to ask questions before I start asking questions? Comments about
I'm
Paul's?
left speechless thinking about what you've shared with us and the place that art and words have in our life. You're here with a group of people who shelter those words on their shelves, and it gives us a reawakening as we start about reopening schools, seeing what a gift we have to share with our students, because you do your work, Mr. Fleischman, the books that you write for our kids. My word is wow. Thank you for writing for us and for our kids.
Well, my word is thank you. And actually, it doesn't happen without everybody in the chain. I write the words, that's like writing a score, and you guys are the conductors. You bring it to the public. And without you putting it in those works in the right hands and describing it and getting people excited and working off your own enthusiasms. I mean, I love it when teachers know how to run with a book. Those are the teachers I write for, and who can get all kinds of things out of it. You draw on your own enthusiasms, experiences, and you're clued into your students. So bravo to you.
Well, we've got a lot of really great runners in this room.
I believe it. I believe it. And I'm keeping them from their dinners, I know.
Well, speaking of the arts, and we're so thankful that you are in defense of the arts and protecting the arts and promoting the arts. But your books and your poems and things have been, transcended across, different arts. So that you've had your poetry has been composed into music, correct?
It was already music, I thought. They were duets, but yes, many composers have set them to actual music for chorus or solo voices. There's a few examples at the bottom of the opening page on my website, paulfleischman.net. Go all the way down, and you can see how two different composers took very different tacks using the same text. So yes, that is true.
Yes. And you've written a screenplay for Seed Folks that can be used in school plays, which
It's a stage play. Yep, it's a large cast made for schools. It's short. It's very simple to put on. And so yes again.
great. And then you play musical instruments, don't you?
I've played many of them. I'm not very good. I'm strictly a living room musician, but there isn't much I haven't tried, from bassoon to accordion to violin to clarinet, saxophone, recorder, piano, yeah, mandolin, banjo. Yeah. I specialize in the instruments people hate: banjo, bassoon, and accordion.
Well, our grandmother played the accordion and I played the bassoon. So,
all right.
So we like those kinds of instruments around here too.
Excellent.
Anybody else with a question or comment? I know Kyle wants to tell a little story.
Well, I just want to say that I had the honor back in probably 2005 or 2006 of visiting your father at his home. And I filmed him doing a little thing. His book, The Giant Rat of Sumatra, was on our Sequoia Award list. And I'll never forget his backyard. And we had this little tiny area, and he was so proud of his oranges that he had. And so anyway, I just thought it was so amazing to be able to meet you here, and to all the success that you've had, and then to have a father with so much success and everything is quite amazing, I know, for you. So anyway, it was just great to meet your father. So that's all.
Well, I can tell you that Westlandia came out of growing up in that yard, because my parents grew everything and they grafted like crazy. And so we had 4 types of apples on every tree, and I could walk out in the morning and pick all kinds of fruit. And that was absolutely the seed that grew into Westlandia.
That's amazing. All right, folks, we're running out of time with Paul Fleischman. Any questions, any comments?
Where was the backyard?
Santa Monica, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where you were born, and you live in Monterey now, which is it pretty close to Santa Monica?
It's 300 miles north. It's on the coast on Monterey Bay, and it's another nice part of the world.
Anybody else? Okay, so first, another thing you said about being a teacher at heart, you were destined to be a teacher, and you've shared your teaching, through your books. And that's just, something with I'm a former teacher. Everyone else in here is a teacher as well. And we just thank you for that, for choosing to keep, being a teacher through your writing and through your literature.
Well, my pleasure. That's my passion.
So, we're always, Kyle and I are always picking out books for schools and new schools. If we were working with a school and they said they wanted 3 Paul Fleischman books and you had input, are there 3 that you just think every school should absolutely have?
Well, what age is the school?
Elementary.
Elementary. Well, Westlandia would certainly be one. I think Seed Folks is a little old for 5th grade. I think 6th grade is probably better, but it's often read in 5th grade, so that's a possibility. Certainly topical and timely. And what else? The Matchbox Diary, which is another book like Seed Folks about immigration, but 100 years ago rather than the present. But that one is close to my heart as well.
And that's a Candlewick title. With the other 2 minutes, do you mind sharing that with everybody real quick?
Well, it's the idea was, it's a diary of objects, not of words, because the boy telling the story when he immigrated to the US from Italy around 1900 was illiterate, but he had seen a diary and he was jealous, he was interested, couldn't write, so he collected a bunch of matchbox, which he found on the floor of the boat station where they left from Italy. And every day he put something in small. And so the book is a record of his family's immigration experience through objects. everything from a peppermint candy to a hairpin to a baseball ticket to a tooth. And it was inspired by an artist friend of mine in New Hampshire who actually, he produced Matchbox Diaries. And I was entranced when I saw one, and I asked him, would he mind if I played around with that idea? And it took me 15 years, but eventually I cracked it. And I love boxes, and I love small things. And if you go to the first page of my website and scroll down a bit, you'll see a whole thing on how the Matchbox Diary came to be written, and has a little video of some of the tiny little Matchbox theaters I've made with the help of the Xerox machine. I played around for 30 years with copy machines to see what they could do as an art tool. I couldn't draw well at all, but I figured out a lot of stuff you can do with the copy machine, and you can see a few examples there. So that's the Matchbox Diary. It's very topical again, and a lot of the material came from the students I tutor, English language learners I've tutored for many decades now. Their material is in there, and sad to say, so little has changed in 100 years. The kind of obstacles they have had, and not all happy stories. So
I feel like I read that book. It has words though, right?
oh
Too?
yes, it does
It's-
have words.
But it's about a 4th, 5th grade level, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think I found that, yeah.
But the boy who immigrated is now a great grandfather, and he's showing it to his great grandfather.
I think I found that. I'm not the original librarian, but I remember that book because of what you were saying about the small objects. I think it was a beautiful book.
Well, the art is stunning by a Russian immigrant, Bagram Ibatulin, who's done several Candlewick and other publishers' books, and incredible detail. He tracked down old matchboxes. He went the extra mile, and it shows. It's visually stunning.
We just can't believe this time has gone so fast, and how honored we are to have you, along with all the other Candlewick authors who were kind enough to join us tonight. People can find out more at paulfleischman.net. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with, as far as something that we can, that's something you'd like to say as you go?
I think I said it all up top.
Yeah, right. Well, again, we just don't know how we got so fortunate to have you here. We're also very thankful to have had Matt Tavares, Christine Suntervant, Jancy Dunn, and Maggie Tokuda Hall. We want to really thank Candlewick, Lindsay, from Candlewick. We want to thank our 2 fellow permabound reps who are here tonight from the Northeast. That would be Ken Kuckle and Cynthia Marin from way up Northeast. We'll thank them for coming. We'd like to really form a partnership with Permabound and Candlewick, maybe do some more Zooms in the future. And so on that note, that was our last one of the season. And we just want to thank our Oklahoma librarians and the guest librarians from out of state.